Hi friends, welcome to the Share, Invite, Proclaim channel. My name is Judy. I'm continuing in a series on the book of Hebrews, or the letter of Hebrews to the Hebrews, by an unknown author. Many think it was Barnabas, but I'll go along with that. But I have talked already about some of the early folks in chapter 11, like Abel and Enoch and so on. And last video, I went from Abraham to Isaac. And things get a little interesting as I go on, at least for me, to be able to understand all the characters that are involved. And move this down a little bit. And so we started out with Abraham and his wife Sarah. Sarah, who was barren, so she had Hagar step in for her, and they had Ishmael. And then Sarah had finally Isaac in Abraham's old age. And God chose Isaac to be the promised son. And then Abraham sent away to find Isaac a wife from his home area, distant relatives, and that became Rebekah. And Isaac and Rebekah had twins, Esau the firstborn and Jacob the secondborn, and Jacob became the promised son. And then Jacob had several wives. He had his love life was Rachel, but Rachel was barren. And so Rachel's sister, Leah, became a concubine of Jacob. And they had quite a few sons: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, I don't know how to say his name, Zebulun, and finally one girl, Dinah. And then at a point where Leah felt like that she was no longer able to have children, she sent in her handmaiden, Zilpah. And Zilpah and Jacob had Gad and Asher. And then Rachel was concerned about her position, so she sent in her maid, Bilhah. And Jacob and Bilhah had Dan and Naphtali. And then finally, God opened Rachel's womb, and Jacob and Rachel had Joseph and Benjamin. And we do know that Joseph had two children, Manasseh and Ephraim, although Ephraim became the chosen son. So this diagram sort of helps me get a focus of all of these different characters, because I look at these characters. Get settled here again. I look at these characters from this perspective. There's an awful lot of drama, a lot of deceit, a lot of revenge, a lot of rivalry, but also a lot of blessing and faith. And faith is why these characters are in Scripture and in chapter 11 of Hebrews. Well, let's start off with drama, and we'll start with Isaac. Isaac was to be married to Rebekah, and she was barren, so Isaac prayed that God would allow her to have a son. But Rebekah was pregnant with twins, and she asked God, why is my baby kicking so much? And God told her that she was having twins, and that they would be rivals, and that the older son would serve the younger son. And same thing as what happened to Abraham and Sarah. And each of these sons would head up a nation. And when the twins were born, then the oldest was Esau, the youngest was Jacob. And we're not told why God why God told only her that Jacob was promised and not Esau. Here's the rivalry. Isaac favored Esau, and probably because he was an outdoorsman and maybe that reminded him of his life. Rebekah favored Jacob. He was a mama's boy. And kids know who the favorite child is in the family. The boys were rivals growing up, probably, and perhaps wanting the love of the other parent. Now, how common do you think that this situation is prevalent in families today, where when you have multiple children, the children know who the favorite one is? I did. I know that my brother, who was the oldest, was the favored one. But I think that favoritism is very common, but it does cause divisiveness in the home. Well, let's look at some deceit. Since God told Rebekah and not Isaac that Jacob was going to be the promised son and not Esau, Rebekah decided that she would give God help, just like Sarah did. And she arranged a way to make this happen. Rebekah orchestrated Jacob cooking food just as Esau comes in from hunting, and he was famished. He thought he was going to die because he was so hungry. Jacob offered him food that he had been preparing, and if Esau would give him his eldest son's birthright, he would give him some food. And because Esau lived for the present, and he didn't think it was such a big to-do, that he agreed. Well, what was so special about the eldest son's birthright? Well, the firstborn was dedicated to God and received a double portion of the father's inheritance. He would care for his mother and his unmarried sisters as long as they were alive. But importantly, he became the leader of the family, and this was a big deal. Could God have orchestrated another plan to secure Jacob as the promised son, as the leader of the family? I think so. Here's the drama. Well, just like in Abraham's time, there was a severe famine that happened in Canaan, and God told Isaac not to go to Egypt as Abraham did, but to stay in Canaan. Well, Isaac traveled to Gerar, a Philistine town, where he did the same thing that his father did. He passed Rebekah off as his sister to the king, the Philistine king. And I'm not going to say his name because I'm sure I'll mess it up. But the king saw Isaac caressing Rebekah and realized that she was his wife and not the sister. So the king then made a public order that he would kill anyone who touched Isaac and Rebekah, because he knew that if they did, God would punish them. So God blessed Isaac, and he became a wealthy man with a lot of crops, with many sheep and goats and cattle. So much so that the king said, "You've got to leave. You've got to leave this country because you are so wealthy. You're taking up so much of our resources." So Isaac went to Beersheba, where God had renewed his promise to him. And what was that? "I will bless you. Your descendants will be a great nation. I will do this because of my promise to Abraham." So Isaac built an altar and worshiped God. And that is something that Abraham always did. Here comes the rivalry. Esau married two Hittite women, Judith and Basemath. Basemath, that's a funny name. Anyway, Scripture says that they made life difficult for Isaac and Rebekah. Well, I can anticipate that they resented them because Esau lost his birthright, and that affected their future. And also, these Hittite women may have worshipped false gods. Here's the deceit. Before Isaac died, he wanted to give the family blessing to Esau. He might not have known that Esau gave up his firstborn birthright, and he may not have known about Rebekah's deception, but Rebekah devised another deception because she wanted Jacob to have this family blessing. Esau was out hunting for a game that he would bring home and fix for his father for the ceremony. Rebekah heard this conversation, and she had Jacob go get some goats, and she fixed the meal, and then she dressed Jacob up in Esau's clothing and sent him in with the food. Now, Isaac knew the difference. He knew the difference between the voice of Jacob and the voice of Esau. But when he touched Jacob, he smelled and felt the clothing of Esau. So he believed that he was giving this family blessing to Esau, but he wasn't. He was giving it to Jacob. Jacob leaves. Esau comes in immediately and begins to fix this wonderful meal for his father. He went into the tent, and that's when Isaac realized that he had been deceived and that he had given the family blessing to Jacob instead of Esau. Now, what was the family blessing? Much harvest of grain, much wine. Many nations will bow down to you. You will be a master over your brothers. Those who curse you will be cursed, and those who bless you will be blessed. Now, when Jacob left, he was angry. So let's get to revenge. Esau hated Jacob for taking the family blessing, and even his first son's birthright. I mean, he was angry enough to kill Jacob. Here's the drama. Isaac and Rebekah then see the anger of Esau, and they tell Jacob to flee and go to Rachel's brother's house, which is Laban in Paradam Aram, and his extended relatives, and marry someone there. Because Rebekah said, in which Esau heard, Rebekah said that she'd rather die than to see Jacob marry a Hittite woman. Now, what do you think Esau thought of that? Well, since Isaac gave the blessing to Jacob, his faith in God allowed him to believe that God would take care of Jacob. But revenge. Esau heard this conversation, and with his mother knowing that he had married 2 Hittite women, Esau went to his uncle, Ishmael, and married one of Ishmael's daughters. And this was revenge against his mother. Now here's the blessing. On Jacob's way to Padam Aram, he stopped at Bethel for the night. And God gave Jacob a dream. It's a ladder to heaven where you had angels ascending and descending, and God at the top of this ladder. And God said, I am the Lord, the God of your grandfather Abraham and the God of your father Isaac. The ground that you are lying on belongs to you, and I'm giving it to you and your descendants. All the families of the earth will be blessed. I am with you and will keep you and bring you back to this land. And Jacob awoke, he worshiped God, and said, this is the gate of heaven. So Jacob's worshiping God. Here's some drama. Jacob did not have a dowry with him, like Abraham had given his servant a huge dowry to give to Rebekah's father. Well, Jacob didn't have that because he had to flee so quickly. And since Jacob had no dowry with him, when he saw Rachel at the well, at the same kind of well, he fell madly, love at first sight. He fell madly in love with her. And she's beautiful, just like Rebekah. and Sarah before him. And he asked her father, Laban, for her hand in marriage. And because he had no dowry, he agreed to work for Laban for 7 years for Rachel. Now, we don't know why 7 was used, but for the Jews, it was a perfect number. So Jacob became a shepherd for his father-in-law, Laban. After the 7 years, Jacob was ready to marry his love of life, Rachel. Here's some deceit. Unknown to Jacob, the custom from the Laban's family was that the oldest daughter had to be married first. Now, maybe Jacob had too much wine that night, but Laban sent in to him Leah instead of Rachel, the oldest daughter. The next morning, Jacob realized that he had been deceived. We don't know the totality of that conversation, but in the end, Jacob agreed to work for another 7 years for the love of his life, Rachel. Now, here's some rivalry. Leah knew that Jacob loved Rachel so much, but she felt like that Jacob would love her since she had borne him so many sons and a daughter. She had Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and then later she had Issachar, Zebulun, and then the girl Dinah. Rachel's jealous. And she did what Sarah did. She had Jacob sleep with her maid, Bilhah, to bear children for her. Bilhah had 2 sons, Dan and Naphtali. After Leah bore the first 4 sons for Jacob, she realized that she wasn't having any more children, so she gave her maid Zilpah as Jacob's wife, and the sons born were Gad and Asher. Here's the drama. One day during the wheat harvest, Reuben found some mandrakes, and Rachel begged Leah to have these mandrakes. Mandrakes were believed to be a stimulant for fertility and conception for barren women. Rachel said, "Well, I'll make a deal. If you give me the mandrakes, I'll let you sleep with Jacob tonight." So Leah became pregnant and had 2 more children, the Issachar and Zebulun. And Leah thought, "Now my husband will treat me with respect, for I have given him 6 sons." Drama. Did Jacob treat Leah any differently? Well, we don't know, but with that comment, we suspect that he continued to show his love for Rachel rather than Leah. Finally, Jacob and Rachel had a son and named him Joseph, and Joseph became the promised favorite of Jacob. And we'll talk about Joseph in the next video. Jacob continued tending Laban's flock, and he knew that he would return to Canaan, and he needed a large family. He needed a large support for his family with grain, with goats, with cattle, with sheep. So he agreed to work 4 more years for Laban, and he said that any sheep or goats that were spotted or black would be Jacob's, and any of the others would be Laban's. Rivalry. Eventually, Laban's sons became jealous, and they complained to Jacob that he was getting wealthy at their father's expense. Jacob began to notice a change in the attitude of Laban. Laban thought everything was his, and Jacob knew that it wasn't. Here's the blessing. God told Jacob to return to Canaan, the land of your father Isaac and your grandfather Abraham. In a dream, the angel of God told Jacob to return to Bethel, where God appeared to him and where Jacob made a vow to God. And this was the vow. "If God will be with me and keep me in this journey, give me the food to eat and clothes to wear, and I will return to my father's home safely. You will be my God." Here's the drama. Jacob fled Padam Aram with his wives, his children, and his flocks of animals. He told his wives exactly what he thought of Laban, that Laban had cheated him and changed his wages 10 times. Well, they then agreed that, well, yeah, Jacob, let's go. Before they left, Jacob stole her father's idols and hid them. Now, I'm thinking, why did Laban have idols? And number two, why did Jacob take them? Here's the deceit. Well, to answer that, Laban had turned to multiple gods, and that's why God was not blessing him. And Rachel had this background of living in a polytheistic home. But then again, maybe she was just removing them so that God would bless Laban. I don't know. But here's the deceit. Laban and some relatives found out that Jacob and all of his family had left, and so they caught up with Jacob. And Laban complained of two things. First, he said, "How dare you drag my daughters and my grandchildren away without me being able to kiss them? And why didn't you tell me you wanted to leave and I would have thrown you a party?" Now, Jacob knew that that was false. The second thing that Laban complained of, "Why have you stolen my gods?" You know, I wonder what influence these pagan gods might have had on Jacob's family. Laban told Jacob that he would destroy him, but the night before, God had given him in a dream this command: do not destroy Jacob, leave him alone. Now, this comment, "I could have destroyed you," implies that he would have done that had not God intervened in his life. Jacob allowed Laban to search through his tents, his possessions, to see if he could find Laban's gods or anything else that belonged to Laban. Well, he goes into Rachel's tent, and Rachel is sitting on a camel's saddle, and she has these gods, pagan gods, under the saddle. And she told her father, "Please forgive me, I can't stand up, I'm on my period." And so he left, and Jacob got really angry. This is the rivalry. He got really angry because Laban had treated him like a criminal. Jacob reminded Laban that he had worked for him for 20 years, and that if God were not on his side, Laban would have sent him away with nothing. Well, Laban still continues to claim that everything was his. Now, to resolve their dispute, Laban finally got the idea that, well, maybe I need to make a covenant with Jacob. And so he suggested they sign a covenant, and each would promise never to harm the other. So Laban returns home, and Jacob continues on to Canaan. Here's the drama. In Jacob's mind, he went from one fire, Laban, to another fire, Esau. He went into the region where Esau lived, the Seir region east of the Dead Sea. Jacob did not know if Esau was still angry with him and wanting to kill him. So he sent some messengers to Esau, and they returned and said, "Well, Esau is coming toward you, and he has 400 soldiers with him." And so Jacob's fearful. He decided that he would divide his group, Laban's family ahead, and then Jacob and their family second, so that if Esau came and destroyed Laban, which he didn't care about really, then the other group, Rachel and the children, could escape. Well, Jacob remembered God and his promises, and so he confessed his sin to God. This is a blessing. That God had shown him kindness and faithfulness. And Jacob reminded God of his promise to Abraham and Isaac. And his request was, save me from the hand of my brother Esau. So Jacob decided to send a gift to his brother. And the gift is interesting. 20 female goats and 20 male goats. 20 ewes and 20 rams. 30 camels, female camels. 40 cows and 10 bulls. And 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. I mean, that's kind of a wealthy person's gift. Here's some drama. Well, in the evening, Jacob sent his wives, his children, his flocks across a small river at Jabbok. And Jacob stayed alone on the other side. And an angel came to Jacob, and they wrestled all night long. And the next morning, Jacob said that he was not going to let this man go unless he blessed him. And at that point, Jacob's name is changed from Jacob to Israel. Why? Because he struggled with God and with men and overcame. So, as Jacob eventually then meets Esau, he bowed down 7 times, and Esau ran and hugged and kissed him, happy to see his brother. No more revenge. So Jacob then traveled on to Shechem in Canaan, and then to Bethel, and built an altar to worship God. God reaffirmed his covenant promise to Jacob, or Israel. Restoration of family relationships is sweet. Here's some drama. As Jacob continued traveling, he stopped at Bethlehem, where Rachel died, giving birth to their 12th son, Benjamin. As Jacob returned to his father near Hebron, his father, Isaac, was now 180 years old. Isaac then was able to see his children and grandchildren. Isaac died, and Esau and Jacob buried him at the same cave where Abraham and Sarah were buried. And it's also where he buried Rachel and later Leah. Here's some drama. A famine happened in the known world, and God had placed Joseph, the son of Jacob and Rachel, had placed Joseph to save grain for 7 years and to sell the grain for 7 years for this huge famine. Jacob sent his 10 sons to Egypt to buy food, but Jacob would not allow Benjamin to go. He had lost his favorite son, and now he's not going to lose his other favorite son. So here's some drama. On the first trip to Egypt, the brothers did not recognize Joseph, their brother, and they had sold him into slavery when he was 17. Eventually, after Joseph is reunited with Benjamin and his father, Jacob, Joseph brought them from Canaan to live in the Goshen area, which is along the Mediterranean Sea. And Jacob had Joseph promise him that after he died and his bones were there, that they would take them back for burial in Canaan. And so before he dies, Jacob gives a family blessing to Joseph, and he began to bless Manasseh, who was the firstborn, but instead God led him to bless Ephraim, the secondborn. Now God gave him insight into these sons of his by these 4 wives. Reuben would no longer excel due to his sin. Simeon and Levi would be involved in war because of their anger. Judah, the brothers, would praise that family line. The scepter and the rulers, the staff and nations would be obedient to them. The Messiah would come from this tribe. Zebulun would live by the seashore and become a haven for ships. Isaac's char would be a raw-boned donkey. It means he'll become a slave. Dan would provide justice for people as a serpent and a viper. This is the tribe that Samson came from. Gad will be attacked by the Moabites, and he will attack them. He'll be in war. Asher, his food will be rich, delicacies fit for a king. He's going to be the baker. And Naphtali, an anchor family, lived north of the Sea of Galilee. And then Joseph would be fruitful. He would have the hand of the mighty one, the shepherd, the rock of Israel. So the mantle as the promised son passed on to Joseph. And then Benjamin, ravenous wolf. He devours prey. He divides plunder. He is warlike. Imagine your father giving this prediction of what will happen to them in the future. Well, there's some interesting insights to these men. Abraham had Isaac in his old age. Isaac had Jacob in his old age. And Jacob had Joseph in his old age. I find that interesting in that it showed me that these births were given by God. Favoritism. Well, Abraham favored Isaac, Isaac favored Esau, and Jacob favored Joseph. What's the cost of being the favorite child to the person and to the family? Well, a major focus for Abraham was the covenant and obedience. A major focus for Isaac was survival from a proposed sacrifice. Major focus for Jacob is a lengthy love life. From him came the 12 tribes of Israel. And from the major focus of Joseph, to be at the right place at the right time to save his family. Also, a marriage partner makes a difference. Abraham and his wife, Sarah was impatient because she was barren for such a long time. So there was family conflict. Isaac and Rebekah. Rebekah was also impatient, but she was on a different page than Isaac. Not on the same page. And Jacob and Rachel was impatient, and she waited a long time to have the promised son, Joseph. So Sarah, Rebekah, and Rachel, they weren't flawless, but they were where God wanted them. And I find it interesting that God changed Abram's name to Abraham, and God changed Jacob's name to Israel. Well, Pharaoh allowed Jacob to take his father Isaac back to Hebron to bury him in the same cave where Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah and Leah were also buried. Now let's look at their faith. They heard God when he spoke to them, and they obeyed. Through their families, the promised son would come and produce Jesus Christ. Their expectations of the promised son were changed by God, and they accepted God's choice. They all worshiped God, and God intervened at times to protect their lives, but more importantly, blessings and faith. That's why Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are in Hebrews chapter 11. A lot of Bible time was given to Abraham, 14 chapters. Isaac had only 3. Jacob had at least 15 chapters of Bible time, and Joseph, that we'll get to, has 15. Well, the next chapter, or the next video rather, will be about Joseph and Moses. This has been an interesting, in-depth study for me, and I appreciate what God has done through these people to bring Jesus Christ to this world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.